Hey GP learners, and welcome to this session where I'm really excited actually because we've got the SystmOne team here with us, and we're going to be talking about their latest update that came out on Thursday, which, I mean, they're so excited about this. They contacted me to say that we just got to do this ASAP. So that says to me this is going to be pretty awesome. Just to explain what we've got planned. So I'm going to hand over to the team. So we've got Kieran and Brett from TPP. And we've also got Dr. Matt Curtis, who works with TPP, and also many of you know is a clinician that does various other hats as well, talking about the product. And then afterwards, we're going to open it up to Q&As because I know we've already had loads of Q&As coming through. So don't worry, you'll get lots of opportunities hopefully to ask questions. And we've already got quite a few submitted. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to Kieran to let him introduce himself and also tell us about the new updates.
That's great. Thanks for that, Gandhi. So yeah, I'm Kieran Fletcher-Vaughan. I'm a senior systems analyst here at TPP, and I've been heavily involved in this design and what's soon to be deployment of our new exciting functionality. And like Gandhi said there, we are very excited about this one. I don't think we've quite realised the appetite for this until we put a mail shot out on Friday and got inundated with hundreds of people wanting this switching on as soon as possible. So I'll just give you a quick overview sort of what the actual functionality is and where it's come from. So we got contacted by PCNs and various users who were running their COVID-19 vaccination hubs and just having a few problems just around the sheer volume of patients that we need to get through. And this was particularly a problem in sort of mixed economy areas where you might have a SystmOne PCN hub, but SystmOne GPs or EMIS GPs or whoever else, and the scale of this meant that the manual registration and booking of appointments was causing a real headache for people from a sort of administrative point of view. And the desire was to have something that could quickly register patients and quickly allow people to book into appointment slots. And we've worked with predominantly Wigan PCN, but also other customers had a vested interest in this to come up with a solution to that problem. So I'll just give you a quick high level of what the product is that we've got and what it does, and then Brett's going to run through it in a bit more detail, really. So we've introduced a capability where you can register a cohort of patients in sort of one click from a CSV file. And it's quite a basic CSV, as Brett will show you, and the idea being that the data set's small, so anyone should actually be able to provide that data set, and it sort of keeps the application quite general rather than so specific to just GPs or just a PCN hub or just a hospital setting, for example. So that's why we've done that. And then based off the back of registering those patients or identifying those patients through other means, you can send out a unique link to the patient to book that appointment on a website. So that, again, allows you to target sort of hundreds and thousands of patients very quickly and very easily in a user-friendly way. Those appointments that are booked by the patients will then subsequently be available in the SystmOne appointment book through the SystmOne overview and ledger, just as you would expect. And it sort of overcomes that problem. I think some people have been using a system to send out their invites, but then still having to copy those across into SystmOne, which obviously must be a huge administrative burden for people. So that will reduce the need to do that. We've also introduced a capability so that when you send those links out to patients, however you do that, then you can actually track what's happened with those. So have they booked an appointment? Did they attend the appointment? Did they DNA? Was it cancelled for whatever reason? Do I need to track those patients and send them another SMS to remind them to book their appointment? So we'll show you that as well. And one of the cool things we've done, which I think is where a lot of the power of our solution comes, is those invitations that we send out to users aren't just a URL. In the background, we're creating a specific invite entity, which allows us then to tie it with the actual appointment that was booked and allow you to do clever things like restricting which appointments are then available to which patients, depending on what invitation type they've got. So you can imagine there's quite a few scenarios where that would be used, and we'll talk you through one during the demo. But that feature we think could be really powerful for people. And then at the bottom I've put there as well, we've done this for SMS and email, just so that we think majority of people will use SMS to contact patients, but email's there as another option, another cheaper option actually, if that's appropriate. So yeah, we just thought we'd include those as well. So I'll stop talking now and I'll let Brett sort of move on to the demo. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Brett. So I'm a product specialist in TPP. And I'm very excited to show you our vaccination booking functionality and the bulk registration today. So we will begin with a simple CSV file. So as you can see, this CSV file has 6 columns. So it shows you the first name, surname, date of birth, NHS number, phone number, and email address. Now, this is the format required in order to upload the file onto SystmOne. It's only necessary to have either one of these contact details recorded for this list of patients. If none of the contact details are recorded, it will show as a failed import, which I will show you next. Once the CSV is uploaded, as you can see, the upper pane is an overview of the successfully imported patients. You will also be able to identify if patient has been registered, uploaded unsuccessfully. I can also easily identify all of the failed imports with a reason. For example, they might not have an NHS number, or maybe the surname was entered incorrectly, or invalid date of birth. Now, at this point, what I can do is I can either manually deal with these patients later on, or I can amend the CSV file and re-import it again. Now, once I'm happy with this imported list, so what I can do is to bulk register them. Now, at this point, what SystmOne would do is to create a temporary registration status for this group of patients for 6 months. Now, it does not override any existing patients which might be already registered in this particular unit for other reasons. So it will not affect any existing registrations. Once the registration is complete, all the columns that you are seeing at the moment, they are completely orderable. So that means I can easily group all the patients with the mobile phones together to send them an invite. Now, as part of the development, we have developed a new list items called Send Patient Appointment Invitation. Now, this is a new configure list option, which is called the appointment invitation type. This is completely configurable, and it's linked to different appointment rota type. It gives you great flexibility to your service, depends on which group of patients you're inviting. So for instance, you might be given a list of patients who have had their first AstraZeneca vaccination, and you want to ensure they will be booked onto the correct clinics. We will look at the configuration right at the end of this video.
It's probably worth jumping in there, and I know I made reference to this at the beginning, but this is the invitation type concept that we've designed, and as Brett's shown there, we've come up with a kind of hypothetical scenario that may be realistic but may not be. In this scenario, we're saying maybe your first cohort of patients that you get that just want their first vaccination, you're not too bothered about which vaccination they get, so you could be running a series of clinics offering the different vaccinations, and they can just have an invitation for that first vaccination that will allow them to book into any of those rotas. But obviously then later down the line, you've got your second vax, and at that stage you're considering, well, which vax did they have the first time round? So your cohorts might be slightly different. And for your second vaccination cohorts, you might want to say, well, actually this time I want to restrict this group of patients to the Pfizer vaccination or the AstraZeneca vaccination. And later on, Brett will show you the configuration that allows this all to work. But the power of having the invitation set up this way is that you can control it that way. And we've spoken to other customers who've said, well, it might be useful if I want to schedule in a big cohort of patients, but say, well, these specific patients can only book into the over 50s rotas or the over 40s rotas, and allow you to sort of stagger at what stage the appointments can be booked into. So it's intentionally flexible so that it will sort of work for different people and what their needs are, but that's the sort of the purpose of it.
Okay, so once the invitation type is selected, you will be given the option to send the invitation via SMS or email. So for users who have been using SystmOne for a while, as you can see, this is a standard SMS configuration screen where you can use a list of user presets or organization presets to send a message to your patients. Now, for each message, SystmOne will generate a patient-specific URL, which will be valid for 7 days. So you will be able to see in the demo later on. Okay, so once the link is generated and the patient has received the SMS text messages, they will be able to click onto the link immediately. Now, as part of our soft security check, and this is where the patient will be able to confirm their date of birth to move on to the next screen, which will show you a list of all the available clinics that are controlled by your organizations. Now, you can see I can, as a patient, I can use the date filter very quickly to search for an available clinic. And if your PCN hub, for example, has multiple locations, you can also use the location filter to quickly identify the next available appointment. You can also define different type of slots, which I'll show you in the configuration screen later on, but the patient will be able to very quickly to book an appointment directly via the link. Once the appointment is confirmed, you will be able to see the appointment details. They can print it, you can take a screenshot, and if the patient is clicking on the link again, the website will give them a message to remind them with their appointment details, rather than the patients accidentally book a duplication of appointments.
And again, at this stage, this will, because it just becomes a normal SystmOne appointment in the rota as usual, if you have got reminders configured, a patient will get a standard SMS reminder, however early that normally happens in your normal process. This just feeds into it as normal.
And on top of that, a link can also be sent within the patient's record as a quick action button as well. So you can also do it on a case-by-case basis if you do need to. Okay, as Kieran has already mentioned about the background entity of the appointment. So let's say if a patient is struggling to book an appointment via the link because maybe their internet is down or maybe the mobile phone is broken, they contacted the hub, and then because they have got an active invitation, when an appointment is booked for them within SystmOne, it will ask you to mark their invitation as booked, so that if the patient does click on the link later on down the line, it will then also show the appointment details rather than giving them the chance to book a second appointment. So moving on to the patient appointment invitation screen. So this is more like a reporting screen or for auditing purposes. So you might be in a situation where you want to be able to see invitations that have been sent in the last 3 days, and I wanted to be able to monitor the appointment status, whether if some patients have not booked an appointment, or if an appointments have been deleted. And in this case, you can then manage them by maybe sending them a second invitation and so on. And as part of the development, we will also add more filters on this screen to allow you to very quickly to filter out information as well.
Yeah, so we imagine that in the future you might want to quickly come to this screen, look at all the patients by status of don't have an appointment booked, and maybe prompt them to book one, or maybe give them a ring and just see why they haven't booked, and if you can help them manually or whatever. So with this has been like a powerful tool to make sure the uptake remains as high as it has been, and maybe even higher if we can help people do that.
And finally, we have got the organization preferences in front of us. So we've got the patient appointment invitation. So for those who have used SystmOne previously, so it's a very familiar screen. So at the top, I can basically restrict how many days in the future that a patient can book appointments in. I can specify different bookable slot types. I can specify bookable rota types. So as you can see, I've got 3 sets up tying in with this demonstration. But one thing that is new to this is below, I've got all the rota templates with tick boxes showing on the right. So that means I can link the new configure list option, which is the appointment invitation type, to this specific rotas. Okay, so this is the end of demonstration for this new functionality. So I'm going to hand it back to Kieran to go through some Q&As.
Cool. Thank you for that. And I know that we've got already a variety of questions coming through as it is. So I guess I'm going to take kind of my priority and just ask a couple of quick questions. And if I can ask one to Matt, first of all, if that's all right. So
certainly.
As a clinician, seeing what this is going to look like, where do you see the really big kind of ways that this can, obviously the functionality is there, but, you know, in terms of looking at how this is going to work for clinics, particularly, you know, the GPs out there, are they vaccinating their practices or as hubs and that kind of stuff? Where do you see the big kind of wins with this?
Well, like many people in primary care, we're mainly focused at the moment on the coronavirus vaccine. That has dramatically changed the way in which we approach what was once a fairly sedate and sedentary process of vaccination clinic bookings. Many of you who are involved in this will recognise the short notice with which we receive vaccine deliveries and the vast numbers that have to be vaccinated. And traditional methods of sending a letter or sticking a poster up in your waiting room just don't work. So this is a real efficient way of getting lots of people into the building at short notice to receive their vaccination. But of course, it doesn't stop with coronavirus. You know, I mentioned other vaccination processes that we do. So the flu clinics could be done this way, and also other things like cervical screening are a brilliant way of inviting. This is a brilliant way of inviting people efficiently in a secure way.
Cool. So I guess that leads a little bit into one of the questions we already had from Alexander Ratcliffe. So he was asking, can you confirm that this functionality is intended to remain beyond acute COVID period? And what plans have you got for other vaccination clinics and invites to review conditions and stuff? So it sounds like there's some of that, but the first part of that, is this going to continue?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't go very well when you take functionality away from people once they start to like it. As we found when we try and get rid of duplicate functionality, we have a headache doing so because people just get so used to it. Absolutely not. This is scalable. We obviously see the power beyond just the COVID clinics, even though they were the trigger to get this up and running. Just the sheer interest we've had in that, and people have been emailing saying, can I use it for this? Can I use it for that? So at present, we're obviously prioritizing people who want to use it for COVID clinics, but once it's there, I mean, the flexible nature of it means that you can sort of use what you want, and it would be silly for us to take that away from people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So as I said, we've had quite a few other questions that have come through previously. I'm going to go to one of those now, and then I'll jump back and forth between what we've got in the chat and stuff. So first one is this functionality available only at the hub units, or can it be used, for example, at individual practices?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it's one that's come through to us as well. So yeah, it's absolutely available across the board at the hub units and practices. I think when we designed it and the initial people we spoke to, it was with the hub unit in mind, but as always, we try and develop in a flexible way that means there's no actual restrictions in doing that. So what we've actually found is there are quite a lot of individual GP practices coming to us and saying, well, actually, I'm responsible for organising the vaccinations for my patients. So I would just like, not necessarily the bulk register bit, but the appointment invitation bit is something that they're very much interested in, and yeah, absolutely be available to those people.
Cool. So go a little bit deeper then. We've got a question from JD who says that this seems to be at the practice level, but the rota needs to be at the hub level where several practices need to book their patients into. So does TPP offer this? I think they're lining it to other kind of products that are out there at the moment and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a lot of people will have established hub units on one, and they'll be using the shared admin capability to book into appointments. And I think people are using that in sort of various different ways. Sometimes the appointments will live at the GP unit, and sometimes they'll live at the hub unit. The way this works is the appointment rotas live at the hub unit in this scenario. But you can send invitations to patients across any sort of shared admin unit. So if you've got 5 SystmOne GPs sharing patients into a hub unit and you can access those, you can send invitations to all of those. But what it will look at is the appointment rotas that are in place at the hub. So as long as there's rotas to represent those, and the GP will still be able to see those using the shared admin capability, but they're the ones that the patients will be able to book into. hope that makes sense.
So just to clarify that point, then, will all PCN practices need to enable the functionality to access the hub? So that's a question for Victoria.
No. So again, it will come down to how individual practices are configured and exactly what they're able to sort of see and access already. But in the scenario where you've got a PCN hub who can see the patients available at, at the GP practices, for example, and they'll be able to send invitations to those patients, and those patients will be able to book into the appointments that are available at the hub, and they need to be created and sort of owned by the hub unit. That's the sort of configuration in place. So if you had like a GP who could maybe see appointments but they didn't share their patients, then actually the GP will need to be the one contacting those patients and sending the invites out to book into the appointments at their GP practice. Is how it works. I'm aware that there's a lot of potential permutations and configurations that could exist out there, and I don't want to cause confusion, but I hope that answers it for most people. And if people don't think I've answered their question or do have sort of follow-ups, I think we were going to share a link to a website, to an email address where people have been able to contact us regarding being an early adopter of this, and if they've got any questions, we'd be happy to sort of take them through that route.
Absolutely. So just to emphasize, a lot of the questions that we've got, and we've had so many that we're not going to be able to answer all of them. So the TPP team have committed to creating an FAQ, which we'll be putting in the links down below in the show notes. And also at the end, I'll give an email address that you can contact through as well. But I'm aware we've got plenty of time, so we're going to go through some more questions still. So I'm going to go to my next one that I've got off here. When patients from other practices are book registered, is their registration linked to the spine? And if so, why is it necessary to provide contact details?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because I guess we've got three sources of information going on here. We've got the SystmOne record, which has data which is hopefully in sync with spine, but obviously only at the point it was last synced. You've got PDS, and then you've got now this third element, which is the spreadsheet of information. So when you import the spreadsheet, we don't at that point hit spine. It's kind of creating a local record. Obviously, if you then go into those records and hit spine, you'll get the synchronization. So the decision we've taken is that the information we get on that spreadsheet around the phone number and the email address, we're going to trust that, and that's the thing that we're going to put on the SystmOne patient record. I appreciate, yes, that then you could sync with spine, and we do have our sort of synchronization tools in SystmOne to allow you to sync with spine in bulk as well. But we think that there's going to be a lot of cases where we don't know who the patient is, so we will need that contact information. And this is also in use in so many varied care settings that we just thought this forward way to do it. It's quite a small data set, so I don't think it's too cumbersome. We expect that all GP systems would be able to output this list for us. And in other care settings, that list will be coming from, for example, hospital HR systems to get that information as well. So we've sort of tried to keep it a really small data set. We don't think it's going to be too onerous on people to do that. And yeah, we're just kind of happy with that. And the feedback from our customers is that's sort of reasonable and expected.
Okay.
I think it's worth pointing out as well, it's sensible to choose your data source carefully. So you want to use a CSV file which is likely to contain the most up-to-date contact details, which would be that person's preference. The NHS spine is often a little bit out of date, particularly for people who don't access the health service regularly. So yeah, choose your CSV file carefully.
Cool. Staying with some of the hub related questions, and then we'll go to, I think, some of the more individual patient based ones that we've got as well. So a couple around, so does this mean you need to have the hub module activated? If so, is there a cost for that? And if not, can this be used with other kind of SystmOne units like the community unit and that kind of stuff as well? So we're after questions on the same sort of topic. Yeah, they're all kind of a similar theme, aren't they? So I think most people who are using a vaccination hub unit have probably already got that in place. Either it was an existing hub unit that they had, or they've procured one separately for this. I think that if you need a hub, if you need a new unit setting up, I think it's just a conversation with our account team, and I think they'll work out what they need to do. But I think most people already have a SystmOne unit
where this can be enabled. For example, if you've got a community unit, absolutely we can turn it on there. If it's an individual GP practice, yeah, we can turn it on there as well. So I think whatever you, I want to be careful and not get myself in trouble, but I think whatever you've got in place, the functionality we can turn on there and make it available to you. But if there is appetite for a hub unit and you need one, I'd encourage you to give our account team a ring, and we can talk about getting that sorted out for you.
Cool. So going on to some additional functionality. So we've had an interesting question from Thomas about, so we have 3 university practices. Could this be used in any way away from COVID times to bulk register patients into SystmOne? And does it create a temporary registration or full-time registration if that was to happen?
Okay, so I'll answer it in reverse. It's a temporary registration at the moment. So it's like a 6-month registration, which we just thought would be enough time to sort of get your first and second backs and then sort of fall off the system at the end. My colleague, Dr. Curtis, stressed to me the importance of saying this is not a temporary resident registration. It's like a temporary resident registration. It's temporary in nature, but it's definitely not a TR, is what he told me in no uncertain terms. And
we were struggling to come up with the correct term, weren't we?
Yeah, we said it was like a temporary registration was the best we could do. But yeah, I think there is potential for this to be used outside of COVID. I think I can see the application of the appointment booking stuff definitely outside COVID vaccinations. The bulk one, I don't want to say we'd just turn this on for people just off the cuff, let's make it available to everyone. I think we'd want to understand what the use cases were and whether we thought they were appropriate to be working in this way, because it'd just be interesting to know what those things are. But there's definitely appetite for us to do that, and we'd welcome those conversations with I think Thomas in this case, just to understand what those are and see if they are done. Because again, we've written it in that flexible way that it should just work at a different care setting, but yeah, we just want to understand what that is really before we sort of just.
Sure. I guess that leads into Suman's one about when with those patients, are they registered? Can we specify they want a temporary registration? Like you say, it sounds like that functionality is not 100% there, but it could be. Definitely for those kind of practices where they have sudden fluctuations in registrations, I can definitely see the want for something like this. So the university practice is a great example. Obviously, normally every September or October, they'll have potentially thousands of people registering in the space of a few days. So having anything that streamlines that would be nice. Yeah.
I think it's something we want to look at. I mean, the disadvantage of this approach to doing something like your university students is we have got a reduced data set. It is just those credentials that Brett showed you. So think you wouldn't get address history necessarily and stuff like that you would probably want a new GP practice, for example. But we're definitely not closing the door. It's just I think we'd want to, before just sort of opening the floodgates on it, we'd definitely need a bit more thought. Just in the meantime, a colleague joined me and shouted in, hub units are all free. So if you do need a hub unit, it's free apparently. So that's great.
Awesome. Cool. So some functionality-based questions then. And so what's the maximum number of patients that can be bulk invited into a single operation?
Okay, so we have some switches that we have in place at the moment. So we've limited it for now to 1,000 patients that you can bulk register at once. That's 1,000. But we're open to feedback if people say that's just a problem. It's just the users we spoke with. The users we spoke with said 1,000 sounded reasonable for them. But if people go, no, it'd be better if it was 2,000 or whatever, we can look at changing those limits. Similarly, we've just introduced some functionality so that we can look at how we limit SMS and email. So they've always, for a while, they've been limited to 500 as a single action, which it currently is. But again, if that's really causing people problems and that's the feedback we get, we can look at how we can maybe increase those numbers. But we so it's 500 for 1,000 to bulk import and 500 SMS or email at the same time. But again, you can then send the next 500 and then send the next 500. We just ask you to chunk it up like that at the moment, just from a performance point of view. But happy to sort of review that. Cool.
So speaking about email, do patients have to have online service logins to book these appointments, or can they book it through other routes?
No, the one of the main sort of drivers for this is, whilst we do already have online services, via our own product, System Online or AirMid or NHS app or whoever you choose to use, doing this en masse for thousands of patients, it's a difficult ask to get everyone to sign up to online services to book these appointments. So the idea behind this is it sort of supplements online services for this particular use case. So no online services credentials required. But if you are, for example, using AirMid, our patient-facing app, and you have booked an appointment, then it will be available in your list of appointments.
Cool. So next up, I've got one from Richard Hennessy. Can we use this to push appointments? So can we send letters to a patient without SMS to say your appointment time is at X? I'm guessing that's some sort of like exporting mechanism.
Can we use this to push appointments? Send a letter to the patient without SMS to say. Okay. I mean, all the functionality around generating appointment letters should enable you to do that as standard. So once the appointments are booked in, I don't know if that question's more around, can we automatically assign an appointment to a patient, sort of your cohort, say, import them and say, well, just randomly assign them and then tell them what the time of the appointment is. That's not covered by this existing functionality. But any sort of reminders or appointment letters that you would normally generate, I think you should just be able to create those as normal. Yeah.
Okay. So Richard, if that hasn't answered your questions, let us know below. Yeah. Okay. So we've got loads of questions coming in. I'm going to go to one of the ones where I filter these. So presumably there's no automated chasing up SMS email if the patient has not booked their appointment within X days of receiving the invitation.
It's not automated, no, but the screen that Brett demonstrated, the patient invites, will allow you to sort of reduce down your cohort or your invites that you're interested in. So you would be able to easily see that of the 500 invites I sent on Monday, the 10 haven't been booked in yet, and sort of take actions to, like Brett demonstrated, say, send another SMS to chase them up or ring them maybe if you wanted to. So it's not automated, but it'll get you there. And I think Matt was sort of explained yesterday the value in that.
I think in the context of what we're trying to achieve at the moment, there are many people who are hesitant about accepting an invitation for a vaccine. And what we wanted to achieve in our practice was a smaller list of people who would benefit from an alternative approach, a telephone call from somebody who could answer their concerns. And so what this allows us to do is it reduces that list of people that we need to phone from a few hundred to perhaps 10 or 20, and we can use a different approach. So that's why, and the functionality that Brett's presented quickly enables you to see who's accepted the invitation and who are still the ones that need to be contacted.
Cool. So talking about potentials for cancellations and stuff. So Melanie asked the question, once booked, if the patient has to go back into the link, can they cancel the appointment from there?
Yeah, so this is a question we sort of expected, and it's quite a common one. At present, we haven't done cancelling through the URL. So I think Brett mentioned in the demo there, if you go back onto the URL, it will show you the details of the appointment that you booked as a sort of reminder, or if you need to check what the address was, so that the place where you booked in. We talked about cancellation, but sort of given the speed that we've turned this around and developed it, we thought with the other tools in place, such as being able to configure what goes in the SMS, and obviously being able to sort of do the manual cancelling that you would normally do in SystmOne, we sort of prioritise some of the other development about just getting it booked and doing the invites and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's something we're open to looking at, doing the cancellation message, but it's not currently available.
Okay. So Fatima Lee's asked the question, could we attach something to the text message, for example, a list of questions to screen the patients?
Yeah, I think you were sort of curious about that one as well, weren't you, yesterday, Matt? We don't have, so there's no structured way of sort of sending those questions and getting results, getting responses to those questions, like publishing a questionnaire, albeit that is something that we are actively looking at the moment, is sort of as part of our SMS features, being able to push out questionnaires and get the answers to those. I think when we talked about it yesterday, Matt, we were saying you could publish sort of links to guidance, like the current guidance on COVID and when to attend and when not to attend.
That's
and you
correct,
could, you could sort of construct that into the message or the email that goes out to the patient. But there'll be no sort of mechanism of directly responding to that at the moment.
That's right, and you can choose a carefully worded message to go out, or a link to another resource that you have, are two very simple ways of achieving that goal. But I think, Kieran, you alluded to some more exciting developments that are in the pipeline as well. So
yeah, absolutely. We're looking in general at how we can communicate with patients better, perhaps patients who don't have an online services account already. So, we have the ability to publish questionnaires to AirMid and templates and things like that, and get that information back. But if you're not using AirMid at the moment, you're kind of limited. So we're excitedly looking at some new developments that are going to sort of enhance our offering in that space, and being able to contact people perhaps just through SMS or email, and giving them sort of links to content.
And for those that want to know a little bit more about what Kieran's talking about, so we did a brief demonstration of some of the initial stuff that's in AirMid and the interactions between forms and that kind of stuff about a month or so ago. So I'll put the link to that down below as well, so you can check that out as well. We're going to crack on with the questions because we've got loads of them. This is awesome. I hope you guys have got enough, fluids around to keep going on things. So Amjad's asked the question: is it possible to restrict the invite to a particular rota date?
So you can't set. There are some date constraints that you can have in place at the moment. You couldn't say it's just this rota on this date at the moment. So what you'd probably have to do if you wanted to be like, well, this week it's my over 40s and this week it's my over 50s, is you could have different rota types that represent those, and you could constrain an invite to point at a specific rota type. Alternatively, there's the feature that Brett talked about, where you can sort of say, well, you can only do it X amount of days in the future. So you could send out cohort 1 and say you have this period to book yours in, or this far in the future, and then cohort 2, you go for the next ones. So it's not quite got that level of flexibility, but I feel like what we do have, you could sort of work around, to achieve what you want to achieve in that space. Okay.
So next we've got a question from Cribio Hex. How can we identify follow-up cohorts within the hubbed temp patients? So for second dose, can we report to find the patients given specific doses? There's no vaccine type coding into the temporary records. I know twinned with that is a question that comes later on, is about the depth of clinical reporting information you'll get from some of this work as well, which I think might help to link with that. So those two questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one we were talking about yesterday. I'm not sure we have a perfect answer to it, to be honest, because as this is sort of alluding to, there's information about these patients in various different places. And as much as we've wanted to be a point of care solution for COVID vaccinations, we're not quite there yet. So yes, in some scenarios, I think there is a dependency on the GP practices still providing those cohorts. The GPs will be getting the notifications in, say patients have had their Pfizer vaccinations, and clinical reporting is sophisticated enough that it can handle sort of working out who the second cohorts are based on when the first one was given, and sort of you could still rely on that mechanism. Also, I think our colleagues in Wigan who are piloting this are very confident that they're able to use their appointment data at the hub to know who would have had an appointment at their hub for the first vaccination, and then use that to subsequently generate a list of patients that they're interested in for their second vaccinations. I don't have the exact details of how they would envision doing that, but they were pretty confident that they had the data on their system just using the appointment reports. I do appreciate this is a bit of a tricky one. I'm not sure we have a one-size-fits-all for this, and I think that's due to the nature of how the vaccines are being delivered in general. They've been done. Some of them are done at hubs, some have been done at individual GPs, some have been done at mass vaccination centres, and I'm not sure I have the perfect answer for you here. I don't know, Matt, whether you've got any a bit of a hospital pass, but if you've got any other thoughts?
Other than I feel the pain of everybody out there. When we have another pandemic, these are things that perhaps will be made a little bit better by those in power above us. But yeah, this is where we are.
Okay. So another question about functionality. Once an appointment is booked, is there a function where read code can automatically be added? I can definitely see the value of that in terms of reporting and searching and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, it doesn't automatically do it at the moment, and I think it's something that Matt, you mentioned yesterday, didn't you? I mean, our as a workaround, I guess, until we look at developing that, any appointment rota that you have the capability to access those list actions that Brett showed you. So the list actions that he showed you when he was importing a list of patients are also available when you run a clinical report and you look at your list of patients, and also on the appointments overview as well. You can you can do a single action for a list of patients, and one of those list actions is to add a code to the record. So if you was keen to have that information, for reporting purposes, like it sounds like it is, for your vaccine clinics, you could go, well, all my patients are booked in now. It's right click, add code, and it'll add it to all those records in one go. So I feel like you could use that tool probably quite usefully in that setting.
That's right. The same action list would enable you to not only send the invitation, but then in the next keystroke add the read code. And I think there is a specific read code for SMS invitation for corona vaccine sent. So you could do that with a second click of the mouse.
And I'd be awesomely impressed if you knew the actual code, SNOMED code for that as well, Matt.
I wouldn't embarrass myself by saying it, because if I got it right, I'd have to leave the room.
I'm sure you could just stream out a random set of numbers and everyone will be like, yeah, he knows it anyway. There's your missed opportunity. So let's go to another one that we've got. Where are we? Yeah, no, that's where that one was. The manual booking prompts. This rota is linked to an appointment invitation type are too vague. Once this functionality is in use beyond COVID, it will be important for this mesh to identify different types. And so is there plans to adjust that kind of terms?
Yeah.
And
I mean, that just sounds sensible. This is the classic type of thing that we deploy it, someone sees it, says this could be better, and we can just implement that into our development life cycle. It sounds sensible. I can see that you want to just be told, oh, well, they've got a flu invite. Is it appropriate that I link it to this at this stage? It's worth noting that the logic we use to prompt you whether you should link to an invite is the same set of preferences that Brett showed you at the end of the demo there, the organization preference that says this invitation is for this rota. But you're right, I guess a patient could in theory have multiple invites for the same rota, probably unlikely, but yeah, and in that scenario what you do get is you do get the option to pick the appropriate invite. So it should be clever enough that it should be obvious what you're picking, but if wording makes that better on the screen, then yeah, absolutely, let's just do it, and that just sounds inherently sensible.
Cool. So just for some clarification comments then, so Ross has commented that they do 4,000 vaccines a week, so upping the limit may be advantageous for them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, fair enough. Stefan asked the question, can the invitations be sent in bulk from clinical reporting screens, so more than 500 at a time, possibly?
Yeah, so yeah, I think hopefully that's come across in the demo. It's a list action, which means it can be accessed through clinical reporting, and as I hinted at earlier, we can look at increasing that limit from 500 to something that's going to work better for you. I think what we're cautious of is just sort of making that a silly limit, and people are trying to send hundreds of thousands of messages at once. So I think the people who are using it, we have to sort of have a dialogue with and work out what's going to work better for them, so we can sort of come to some compromise at a nice number, that's going to work for everyone. So I know the guys who are piloting it right now in Wigan, we've asked for feedback on the limits on the number, so they'll we'll change them depending on what they think. But then once we sort of do a wider rollout, then yeah, we'll just keep getting that feedback and adjusting as we need to.
Sure. And definitely another comment about increasing potentially some of the limits for the large send-outs there. Kribex asked another question, which was, how can we use the system to filter out patients, i.e. those with anaphylaxis issues, COVID in the past 4 weeks, pregnancy? Is there anything that you feel can work, or if not specifically within this, other functionality within SystmOne that could help?
I mean, immediately it points at clinical reporting, how those cohorts are being identified. I don't know enough about the sort of COVID cohorts to know whether these would have been taken into account already. So, Matt, I'm going to look at you.
So it's probably worth separating out the bulk registration from the appointment invitation functionality, because with the bulk registration, you won't have access to the entirety of that person's medical record, probably. But for your own patients for whom you've got access to the entire medical record, then this functionality, I think, would work very well in terms of running a report and including and excluding and then inviting those people.
Okay. So an interesting one from Jane asking about apologies for being late, but how soon can we get this switched on? I believe this functionality is already there, isn't it? It's just a case of
we released it last week, as you said in your introduction there at the beginning. So we're obviously keen for people to get to use this as soon as possible. I mentioned at the start we've been inundated with people interested in this functionality, which is very exciting for us. But obviously we don't want to sort of rush it out there until we've caught all the gremlins. So we've got a relatively large PCN using it right now. We'll very soon be looking for probably a handful of sites more to use this, and then we'll be sort of looking at a wider scale rollout. But we're talking days and weeks probably, rather than like months to get this stuff rolled out, because we sort of appreciate the urgency of it and how keen people are to use this. And actually I have got a meeting this afternoon where that's what we're going to talk about, is the sort of the rollout of this stuff now that people are using it. How quickly can we go? And that's going to be sort of I guess from me personally, it's going to be how quick can we go rather than how slow can we go with this stuff. So
cool. We've got a couple more to go, but this is going to be my last shout out for any further questions that people have to ask them, because I'm aware that we've answered quite a few. So if you do have any burning questions that we haven't answered so far, now's your chance to ask them in the chat. Obviously, we do have the FAQ and the email address coming up a little bit in a short while, just additionally. I know we've had one from Margaret Ratzer. If the patient books the first appointment, could the second one be triggered automatically if the rota's already on?
Second one we triggered automatically. We talked about doing some stuff with the invites a while ago, and we sort of decided to sort of deprioritize it. So we thought at some stage we could potentially look at scheduling a second back based on when you had your first one, but we were concerned with doing that and spending the resource doing that a lot, because the first back might not be on the system or have sort of been caught by the invitations, because we're into cohort 6, I think it is now, and a large percentage have already been done. So what we thought is we'd just sort of rely on the data that is available already in the system, or the GPs generating those cohorts to do the second vaccination one. So we've not tried to do any sort of clever working out of second vaccinations at present. Again, the door's not shut on that if we have got some good ideas, but it felt like there was a level of ambiguity around what the requirements would actually be, and a potential level of not having the data available to rely on to look back on. So we've just sort of left it in its current state at the moment.
And it's probably worth remembering that there is still not absolute certainty about the date of delivery of your second vaccination lot as well. So speaking as a GP running a vaccination service, we're a bit hesitant to hardwire somebody's second appointment because we don't know yet that the vaccine's going to be there. I'm sure it will be, but we can't guarantee it.
Yeah, and I guess that leads into Stefan's second point about it would be really handy when the first appointment was marked as finished that we could automatically trigger the next URL. I think that was in relation to an earlier comment he made about if the URL is used to book the appointment, can we also gather further metrics and stuff? But as Matt mentioned, the supply of the vaccine is something you obviously need to factor into that kind of thing. But with that second part, I mean, can you gain further metrics and stuff with once the patient's booked the appointment?
So the URLs can I report on this? I think that's one I'll look at and put on the FAQs. I seem to think Stefan's contacted us to be one of the early adopters. The name rings a bell. So I'll take that one away and I'll look into it better, because I don't want to sort of make up an answer for you, but I'm sure that there's something we can do.
Sure. And as we finish off, I'm going to go to there's been a theme of questions that have come through. So I know it's not a specific one, but lots of people have asked about the kind of support that they can get in terms of switching this on, whether it's through their network or through their practice. What kind of support is going to be available? Is there a phone a friend option kind of thing like in terms of it not working, that kind of stuff? And can you just give us a bit more details for the rollout of this in terms of for practices? And there's definitely been that additional comment made by JD about speed, obviously important. We're looking at cohort 6 right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We recognise that. So I think I've sort of touched on this a little bit, but I'll just go over it again. So we've got an area using it now to find the sort of initial issues, if there are any. So far, the feedback has been very positive, very encouraging from Jonathan Kerry in Wigan, who's been sort of the key driver in that area. He's really impressed with it. And so, and sort of typical standard process for us as TPP is, while it's sort of in development, initial deployment to pilot sites, they have a direct line to our sort of analysts and developers who've been working on that. And I think we'd probably extend that invite to the next bunch of organizations that we enabled. You know, if you find any issues, just ring straight through to the people who've been working on it. And then once we're sort of happy that, you know, it's stable to the point of we want to roll it out to the entire estate or a much larger proportion of people, then it'll become a sort of standard help desk procedure for us. You know, it's a live product. There is a relatively comprehensive user guide that's been written and distributed through our sort of standard channels. I think we've email shotted a lot of people. It's in our document section of F1 Help, and it was on a status message as well. That has been uplifted this morning, and we'll sort of push out a new version of that as well. And I think that's it really. That's sort of our standard channels of support that we would normally have are the ones that are available for this as well.
Mm-hmm. And again, you've got all this content as well from this earlier episode. So for those that are joining us a little bit later, you know, we had a full demonstration of the product, what you kind of need to do and how to function it and things. So feel free to have a look back at that. We mentioned earlier that if people did want to ask any further questions and things, feel free to do so. So this is the email that you need. It's COVIDFacts, and that's CCS at the end, at tpp-uk.com. I typed that wrong 3 times in preparation for this, so it's definitely the right email address now that's on screen right now. And that email address will also be in the show notes, along with the links to the FAQs once we've been able to get all that ready for you. So you'll have a link down below. So probably check back later today or tomorrow, and we'll hopefully have some details. Maybe give us a little bit longer because we've had a lot more questions actually than we planned, I think. But I would love to thank everybody for their time and the opportunity to ask this. I know there's also been some really nice comments on in there as well. So people's just saying, you know, thank you for creating this functionality in terms of helping practices and stuff. Again, to summarize to those that have joined a little bit late, this functionality is already there. You just need to contact TPP to basically get the right switches, by the sounds of it, sorted, and then you're up and running hopefully shortly afterwards. But yeah, would love to thank everybody. So thank you, Kieran, Brett, and Matt, for your time. Appreciate it. It's tricky sometimes answering all these kind of questions about what we're talking about and things, but hopefully that's been a useful demonstration for everybody. Right. And as always, each of you, if you do have any further comments, questions, let us know in the chat below. I'll be keeping an eye on that for the next couple of days or so. And as always, you can contact myself as well further, echplearning@gmail.com. And we're here to help save you and your patients time by enhancing primary care and learning. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.